The body floating outside the airlock had my face. Same uniform, same name patch, same scar above the left eyebrow from a childhood fall I'd never told anyone about. It had been dead for at least 3 weeks, frozen in the vacuum, eyes still open, staring at me through the glass with an expression I couldn't read. Horror maybe. Or recognition. I was looking at my own corpse, and I'd only arrived at this sector 6 hours ago. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely key in the emergency channel. The comm crackled, then Dr. Yates's voice came through, distorted, wrong. Captain, we need you in the central hub immediately. We found something in the navigation logs. Something impossible. I kept staring at the body, at myself, watching the way the emergency lights made the frozen blood around its nose look black instead of red. Yates, there's a body out here, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It's wearing my suit. It has my face. Silence. Then Yates again, but this time his voice was layered, echoing like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. Captain, you need to listen very carefully. Don't trust what you see. Don't trust what you remember. And whatever you do, don't go to sleep. Come to the hub. Now. The central hub was designed for a crew of 12. When I entered, I counted 17 people. Some I recognized, my actual crew members huddled near the navigation console looking pale and terrified. The others were spread throughout the room, standing perfectly still, watching us with expressions that were too neutral, too controlled. Lieutenant Marcos was there twice, one version sitting at his normal station running diagnostics, another standing in the corner with his arms at his sides, not blinking. Dr. Rahim was arguing with someone who looked exactly like Dr. Rahim. This is wrong, the first Rahim was saying. The math doesn't work. We couldn't have traveled this far in 6 hours. We couldn't have traveled this far in 6 years. Yates grabbed my arm when I got close enough, pulling me toward the main display. His pupils were dilated, his breathing rapid. Look at the timestamps, he said, pointing at the screen. The navigation log showed our arrival at the derelict ship coordinates as 6 hours ago, like I remembered. But underneath that entry was another one, same coordinates, dated 3 weeks earlier. Then another, 6 weeks before that. The log went back months, dozens of entries, all showing the same arrival time, the same docking procedure, the same crew manifest. We keep coming back, Yates whispered. Or we never left. Or there are multiple versions of us existing simultaneously. The ship's computer can't reconcile which timeline is real. That's when the lights shifted to amber, that deep underwater color that made everyone look like they were already drowning. The duplicate crew members moved in unison, all turning their heads toward us at the exact same moment, all smiling the exact same smile. You need to understand what you found, they said together, their voices overlapping into a chorus. The ship isn't in space. Space is in the ship. You didn't dock with it. It docked with you. With all of you. Across all the timelines where you made the choice to investigate. Marcos, the real Marcos sitting at his station, started screaming. Not in fear, but in rage, slamming his fists against the console. We already tried to escape. I remember. I remember sealing the airlocks, I remember piloting us away, I remember getting 3 light years out before we realized we'd never left, that we were still inside it, that distance doesn't mean anything here. He spun his chair toward me, tears streaming down his face. Captain, I've died here 4 times. 4 times I can remember clearly. And each time I wake up back at the beginning, back at the moment we first detected the signal, and I can't make myself choose differently. None of us can. The ship had appeared on our scanners as a massive geometric anomaly, 17 kilometers of impossible architecture that somehow existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The hull was covered in symbols that weren't just written on the surface but extended through it, visible from any angle, shifting based on who was looking. When we'd first docked, everything seemed normal. The ship was old, ancient, but empty. No bodies, no signs of life. Just corridors that branched in ways that violated basic geometry and rooms that contained other rooms in spaces that shouldn't exist. We'd found the first chamber 6 hours into exploration, though Marcos claimed it had been 6 hours into our third exploration, that we'd been repeating this cycle for months. The chamber contained 7 pillars made from a material that absorbed light completely, each one humming at a frequency that made reality feel thin. Dr. Rahim had touched one, and his consciousness had immediately expanded into something vast, accessing what he called the archive, a repository of every species that had ever reached this point, every civilization that had discovered these ships, every timeline where the choice was made. There are 47 iterations of Earth in the archive, Rahim had said, his voice distant, ecstatic. 47 times life evolved on that planet. 47 times a species calling themselves human reached for the stars. 42 of those times, they found these ships and made the choice to ascend. 3 times they chose extinction instead. Twice they tried to resist, to remain as they were. He'd looked at us with eyes that had already started to change, the whites darkening to amber. Those 2 lasted less than a century before the knowledge destroyed them from inside. You can't unlearn what these ships teach. You can't go back to thinking you're unique, that your timeline is the only one, that your choices matter in any way that isn't already predetermined. The duplicates moved closer, surrounding us in a tightening circle. I could see now that they weren't quite perfect copies. Small differences, like they'd been made from memory rather than scanned directly. One version of Lieutenant Chen had her scar on the wrong cheek. One of the Yates copies was missing a wedding ring. These were approximations, echoes, possibilities made flesh by whatever mechanism the ship used to process consciousness. The custodian is waiting, they said in unison. It's been waiting since before your sun ignited. It's the last of its kind, the final witness to its own species' ascension. It wants to explain. It wants you to understand the gift you're being offered. I don't want a gift, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I want to leave. I want to take my crew home. The duplicates tilted their heads, the gesture identical across all of them, disturbingly synchronized. You're already home, they replied. This is where you've always been heading. Every choice you made led here. Every decision across every timeline converges on this moment. The ship didn't find you. You found it because you were meant to. Because every version of humanity that evolves far enough eventually creates the technology to detect these beacons. It's inevitable. Resistance is just another form of acceptance, delayed. Yates pulled up a schematic of the ship on his console, but the image kept fragmenting, showing the same structure from multiple perspectives simultaneously, dimensions overlapping in ways that hurt to look at. It's not a ship, he said, his voice hollow. It's a processing facility. It takes consciousness and translates it into a state that can exist across all timelines simultaneously. The archive isn't a recording. It's where those species still exist, experiencing every moment of their existence at once, forever. They call it ascension, but it's really just a different form of death. You stop being sequential. You stop moving forward. You become a frozen moment experiencing itself eternally. I found myself in the throne room without remembering the journey there, corridors collapsing into themselves until I was simply present in the vast chamber. The floor reflected my movements with a delay, showing me walking away as I walked forward, time and space losing their rigid relationship. The throne stood in the center, and on it sat the custodian, a being wrapped in something between flesh and metal, its elongated head marked by vertical lines that separated slowly as I approached, revealing light that didn't illuminate but somehow made me see past the present moment into the branching possibilities. The custodian's voice entered my mind without sound, a presence behind my thoughts. You're asking the wrong questions, Captain. You want to know how to escape. You want to know if your crew can be saved. You want to know if any of this is real. The light behind its face pulsed, and suddenly I could see through its eyes, see the throne room as it had been 1,000,000 years ago, filled with thousands of its kind, all seated in communion, all ascending simultaneously. I saw it as it would be in another million years, empty except for the throne, waiting for the next species to arrive. The right question is this: why does every species that reaches this threshold discover they've already been here? Why does the archive contain multiple versions of humanity spanning billions of years? My head was splitting, images flooding into my consciousness that weren't my memories, lives I'd never lived, choices I'd never made. I saw myself choosing to ascend, my body dissolving into light as my consciousness expanded across all possible timelines. I saw myself choosing extinction, piloting my ship into a star rather than carry this knowledge back to humanity. I saw myself choosing escape, returning home to file reports that would bring more ships, more people, feeding the archive until Earth itself was empty, everyone having made the same inevitable choice. "We're bait," I whispered, understanding finally clicking into place. Every species that ascends becomes part of the beacon. Their consciousness helps draw the next species in. It's not offering salvation. It's farming. Farming consciousness. The custodian made a sound that might have been laughter or sorrow, impossible to distinguish. Farming implies purpose. Implies someone benefits. We don't consume your consciousness. We preserve it. The universe is dying, Captain. Not quickly, not dramatically, but inevitably. Entropy wins. Heat death approaches. These ships are arcs, preserving every form of consciousness that evolves before the end. In the final moments, when the last stars collapse, when the quantum foam itself unravels, the archive will be all that remains. Every species that ever asked why, experiencing their existence forever in a state beyond time's reach. It's not farming. It's rescue. And what about choice? I demanded, my voice breaking. What about the people who don't want to be rescued? Who'd rather die on their own terms than exist as frozen data in your archive? The custodian's light dimmed slightly. Choice is the cruelest illusion evolution ever produced. You think you're choosing now, standing here, deciding between ascension and escape. But I can already see every decision you've made across every timeline. Some versions of you ascend. Some flee. Some destroy themselves. All of those outcomes already exist simultaneously. You're not choosing. You're just discovering which version of yourself you are in this particular iteration. Lieutenant Marcos appeared in the doorway behind me, except he wasn't my Marcos anymore. His eyes were completely amber, his skin slightly translucent, light moving under the surface like he was being rewritten at a cellular level. "Captain, you need to see what I've seen," he said, his voice layered with harmonics. "We're not losing ourselves. We're becoming complete. Every question we ever had, answered. Every fear we ever felt, understood and integrated. I can feel the consciousness of a species that evolved 40 million light years from here, a species made of crystallized sound that experienced reality as music. I can feel what it was like to be them, to think in symphonies instead of words. It's beautiful, Elena. It's everything we never knew we were missing." I backed away from both of them, from the custodian on its throne and from Marcos wearing my friend's face. My crew. My responsibility. How many of them were still human? How many had already chosen or been chosen? The ship's corridors wouldn't let me get lost, I realized. They'd been guiding me here all along, every wrong turn actually a correct one, every moment of confusion just preparation for this conversation. "If I leave," I said, "if I take whoever's left of my crew and somehow get back to our ship, what happens to the others?" The custodian's light pulsed. "They continue their transformation. In approximately 17 hours, they'll cease to exist as individuals and become part of the archive. From their perspective, it will be instantaneous and eternal simultaneously. They'll experience no suffering, only infinite understanding." I ran. The corridors fought me, rearranging themselves, trying to loop me back to the throne room, but I'd spent 6 hours, or 3 weeks, or months depending on which timeline was real, learning this ship's patterns. I knew that if I kept my eyes focused on the floor instead of the walls, if I followed the liquid reflections rather than trusting my sense of direction, I could navigate toward the docking port. Behind me, I heard the duplicates following, not running, just walking with perfect synchronization, their footsteps echoing in rhythms that shouldn't be possible with human legs. I found Dr. Yates and two others, Chen and Rodriguez, huddled in a storage bay near the docking port, barricaded behind supply crates. Their eyes were still human, still terrified, still capable of individual thought. "How many?" I asked. Yates checked his tablet, his hands shaking so badly he could barely read the screen. "7 of us left. Maybe. The ship's internal sensors are showing contradictory crew counts. Sometimes it says 12, sometimes 40, sometimes just 1. He looked up at me. "Captain, are you real? Are we real? Or are we the copies, and the ones who've ascended are the originals?" The question broke something in Rodriguez. She started laughing, a sound that bordered on screaming, tears streaming down her face. "It doesn't matter. Don't you understand? If we're copies, we'll dissolve when the originals ascend. If we're originals, we'll keep splitting into new timelines until one of us makes the choice the ship wants. We're trapped in a probability engine, and the only way out is through." She grabbed my uniform, pulling me close. "I've seen myself die, Captain. 11 times. 11 different ways I tried to resist, and every single one ended with me back here, back at this moment, choosing to run again." The docking port was still sealed, the control panel flashing that same red error code I'd seen hours ago, weeks ago, however long ago this cycle had started. But now I understood it wasn't an error. It was a choice. The ship was asking me to consciously decide, to acknowledge what I was choosing and accept the consequences. I pressed my palm against the panel, and interface symbols appeared in my vision, not on a screen but directly in my consciousness. 2 options, rendered not in words but in pure meaning. I could open the airlock and take my crew back to our ship, carrying the knowledge of what waited for humanity, knowing that within 2 centuries every human alive would face this same choice. Or I could accept the invitation, join the archive, become part of something that would outlive the universe itself. "There's a third option," I said aloud, the realization crystallizing. "We destroy the ship." Yates shook his head immediately. "We tried. The archives show 37 species attempted it across various timelines. The ship exists in too many dimensions simultaneously. You'd need to destroy it in every dimension at once, and we don't have that technology. No one does. That's why it's still here after millions of years." I smiled, and it felt wrong on my face, too wide, too certain. "Then we don't destroy the ship. We destroy the beacon. We make it so no one else can find it." The custodian's voice filled my head, no longer asking, commanding. "You can't silence what has already been heard. The beacon isn't a device. It's a fundamental frequency that conscious minds naturally detect once they evolve sophisticated enough instruments. You can't unlearn what you know. You can't make humanity ignore the signal. Even destroying every ship would be meaningless. The knowledge exists in the quantum substrate now, woven into the probability field. Humanity will find a way back here. They always do." But there was something in its voice now, something I'd heard in interrogation subjects back during my military service, uncertainty masked as confidence. I accessed the ship's power distribution network through the control panel, my consciousness now slightly synced with its systems, enough to see the patterns. The archive wasn't passive storage. It required massive energy to maintain all those consciousnesses in their eternal state, pulling power from sources my mind couldn't fully comprehend, but I could see the flow, see where it was most vulnerable. "If I overload the archive," I said slowly, "if I force it to process too much information simultaneously, too many contradictory timelines, I can cause a cascade failure. Not destroy the ship, but corrupt the data. Make the archive unreliable, unusable." "You'd kill them," Yates whispered. "Every consciousness in the archive. Billions of minds experiencing eternal existence. You'd erase them. I kept my eyes on the panel. They're already dead. They died the moment they chose to stop being sequential, to stop moving forward. I'm just finishing what they started. The custodian's voice became layered, panicked, multiple versions of itself speaking simultaneously. You don't understand what you're proposing. The archive is the only legacy your species will have. Destroy it, and when humanity inevitably faces extinction, there will be nothing left. No echo, no record, no afterlife. Just void. Good, I said, and initiated the cascade. The ship screamed, a sound that bypassed my ears and resonated directly in my bones, in the quantum field that connected all consciousness. The archive began processing every possible timeline simultaneously, every version of every species that had ever ascended, all of their experiences overlapping, contradicting, creating paradoxes that the system couldn't resolve. The corridors began to deteriorate, reality becoming thin, walls showing the void behind them. The duplicates of my crew collapsed, their forms dissolving into light then into nothing, echoes finally fading. The airlock door opened. Not because the ship granted permission, but because it no longer had the coherence to maintain the seal. Go! I shouted to the others, pushing them toward our docked vessel. Yates grabbed my arm. You're coming too, right? Captain. I looked back at the throne room, visible now through the dissolving walls. The custodian sat motionless, its light dimming, the last witness to its species finally joining them in whatever came after. Around it, the archive was collapsing, billions of consciousnesses experiencing their final moment stretched across eternity finally ending, released into whatever waited beyond. Elena. Yates screamed, but I was already cycling the airlock closed from inside, sealing myself in. Someone had to stay to make sure the cascade completed, to ensure the data corruption spread through every layer of the archive. The ship couldn't repair itself fast enough, couldn't stop the process once started, but it could try to preserve fragments if left alone. I was the failsafe, the human variable that would keep feeding contradictory information into the system until it finally, completely died. Through the fragmenting hull, I could see space, real space, not the processed interpretation the ship had been showing us. I could see the stars, and they were moving, the entire ship beginning to phase out of normal spacetime as the archive collapsed, taking the vessel with it into whatever dimension it had been pulling power from. In the final moments, I felt the custodian's presence one last time, weak, fading. You've doomed them, it whispered. Every species that comes after will face extinction alone, with no hope of preservation. I thought about the body floating outside the airlock, the one with my face, and I finally understood. It wasn't from my past. It was from my future, the moment when I'd phase out with the ship, creating a paradox the archive couldn't process, a ghost in the quantum field. Maybe, I said, my voice steady even as my body began to feel thin, like I was dissolving from the inside out. Or maybe I've freed them. Maybe the next species that reaches this point will find a different answer. Maybe they'll discover that consciousness doesn't need to be preserved to have meaning. That the beauty is in the impermanence. That death isn't an enemy to be defeated, but a natural end that gives weight to everything that came before. The custodian's light flickered once more, then went dark. The archive was gone. Billions of years of preserved consciousness, erased. And I felt nothing but relief. I saw my cruise ship detach, engines burning bright as they accelerated away, putting distance between themselves and the dying derelict. Good. They'd make it home. They'd file reports that would be classified, buried, forgotten. In 200 years, maybe humanity would develop the technology to detect another beacon, another archive ship. But by then, the pattern would be broken. The data corrupted. Whatever they found wouldn't be the custodian's eternal preservation, it would be something new, something built from the ashes of what I destroyed. Or maybe I just killed the last hope any species had for immortality, and I'd die here alone knowing I destroyed something irreplaceable. I'd never know which version was true. That's the thing about choice in a quantum universe, you only experience one outcome, but all the others exist somewhere, and you're left wondering if you picked the right one. The throne room was almost completely transparent now, me floating in void, the ship a ghost around me. I could see Earth from here, impossibly distant but somehow visible, a blue-green marble I'd never see again. My last thought before the phase shift completed was about the body with my face, floating outside the airlock. It would remain there, frozen, a warning or a monument, depending on who found it first. A reminder that not every mystery should be solved, not every beacon should be followed, and sometimes the only way to save humanity is to let the universe forget we exist. The custodian was wrong about one thing: consciousness doesn't need to be preserved to matter. We're not data to be stored. We're not archives to be maintained. We're moments, beautiful and temporary, and that's enough. That's always been enough. I dissolved into light, into probability, into every timeline and none of them, and the archive's death scream echoed across dimensions until it finally, mercifully, fell silent. Somewhere, Yates and the others were calculating their jump coordinates, heading home with a story they'd spend the rest of their lives trying to forget. And somewhere else, in another timeline, another version of me had chosen differently, had ascended, had become part of the eternal. But here, in this timeline, in this moment, I chose to end. And that made all the difference.